Spawn points. They're very important in a combat style game. Whether it's you're able to spawn on one of your team members, a building, an objective, command post, whatever. Hell Let Loose is no different. There are 5 spawn points that we're going to talk about today in this video, and those are the following: the HQ or headquarters spawn, Outpost spawn, Garrison spawn, Halftrack spawn, and Airhead spawn. We're going to talk about all the important details you need to know that may help you in battle, what you need to know about them, how they work, how they could be affected by the enemy, your team, and so on. And that's today's video. How do the spawn points in Hell Let Loose work? So I briefly want to go over the 5 spawn points that we're going to be talking about in this video today, and they are the following: Outposts, or OPs, for your squad, Garrisons for the entire team, Airheads, which also apply to the entire team, Halftracks apply to the entire team, and Headquarters spawn, which are for the entire team. So we'll start talking about Outposts first. So, what's an Outpost? Well, an Outpost is a spawn point that an officer of a squad can put down for said squad, and only that squad can use that Outposts. Now, Hell Let Loose is broken down into a squad-based system. You know, you have Abel, you've got Baker, you've got Charlie, so on, you get the point. Each of those little squads, barring they're not a tank squad or the commander, can put down an outpost. These outposts are able to bring your guys every 20 seconds. So if anyone goes down, they can use that spawn point, get back in the fight within 20 seconds. If not sooner, due to the spawn timer constantly running. Now, one thing I want to touch on with the outpost, though, is you cannot deploy another outpost instantly. You'll have to wait a full 2 minutes before you can redeploy a new outpost. Now, this can be bypassed if you remove your previous outpost. So keep that in mind when in the field. Now, where can you deploy these? What are their limitations? So outposts, you can obviously put it anywhere in the blue zone, but when it comes to the red zone, there's a couple different rules here. So on warfare, if you're an infantry leader or an infantry squad lead, you can deploy it 2 squares into the red zone, and of course in the neutral white zone, where recon commanders can put a outpost anywhere on the map on warfare mode. Now, on offensive, this is a little bit different. If you are on the attacking team, you can put your outpost 2 squares in the red, while a recon officer can put their outpost 4 squares in the red, as that's as far as they can go. On defense, if you're on the defensive team on offensive mode, you can't put a outpost in the red zone if you are an infantry leader, but if you are a recon commander, you can put your outpost in the red zone at least 2 squares. Now, how do you destroy an outpost? It's actually pretty simple. You walk up to an enemy outpost within 10 meters of it, and it'll go away. Simple as that. Now, I'm going to include a audio bit of what each nation's audio for the garrisons, outposts are, and so on right now. So I'm only going to do this once, so here they are. Moving on now, we're going to talk about garrisons. Now, garrisons are the backbone of keeping your team in the fight, whether it's on defense or offense. You need these for both. And these are the major spawn points that your team as a whole can use, as your entire team, well, can use them. Now, commanders, officers, and spotters, or the recon commanders, can deploy garrisons, provided they have enough supplies to build them. To build a garrison in the blue zone, you need 50 supply. Perfect if you have a support player in a squad, or you just have some random supplies nearby. Pretty good. If you're in the red zone, you need 100 supply. So this may be a little harder to handle, but airdrops and truck drop supplies can do wonders for you. Or if you do a swap between 2 support players, Makes for really nice and stealthy garrisons. Now, unfortunately for the garrisons, there is a cap on how many you can have, 8 per team. So if you have 8, unfortunately, you will not be able to make a new one until one has been decommissioned. Usually, if you're on offensive or you are so pushed up on warfare mode, you can typically disable some of your very far backline garrisons to put new ones up. That way you can get another garrison for the attack, or if you're defending an objective and you want to spread out your garrisons. Now, the spawn timers for the garrisons are 40 seconds. And they're always constantly running, so your spawn time might be varied. But the most you can wait is 40 seconds. There is one major exception, and that is the default garrisons you find on offensive mode. These are the garrisons you can find on the second objective and the other potential second objectives when you're attacking on offensive mode. These garrisons can spawn you in every 10 seconds, and they are really nice to keep alive. So if you're defending, these are a top priority garrison, as they're also very protected in their own right, which I'm going to touch on now. Now, there are several ways you can take out garrisons. So the most common way is simply going up to it. There'll be a prompt, you can destroy it. For regular garrisons, ones that are deployed by an officer, commander, recon commander, so on, they can be destroyed by explosives such as a rocket from a bazooka, or a tank round, or a satchel charge. But if it's a default garrison on offensive mode, you have to go up and disable it manually. Nothing else will do. You have to go up, disable it, no explosives will work. You have to go up. Nothing else will stop it. And as you see on screen now, this is a default garrison. I'm going to destroy it. It should only take a couple seconds, and it'll be done. So that's that. That's how you disable it. But now we're going to get into when you get very close to these garrisons, what you should hear. If you saw the footage, it looked a little weird, and I'm going to explain that now using the sounds. So listen closely. So this raises the question then, what disables garrisons but doesn't destroy them? Or what makes it to where your team or the enemy team can't spawn on a garrison? Well, we're going to start at the top here. It's a nice little picture here. This will spell everything out. So if you're in the blue zone, we'll start with that first. No enemies within 50 meters. There's a little picture there on the right. It shows a garrison on a map, and it shows an open circle, nothing there. It means there's no enemies within 50 meters of that garrison. Number 2 states enemies within 50 meters. So if you have an enemy within 50 meters of a blue zone garrison, on a map you will see a enemy near symbol or a red exclamation point on the garrison itself. But people can still spawn on it. It's just letting you know that enemies are near within 50 meters. Thirdly, we have enemies within 15 meters. Now, this means if there's an enemy within 15 meters, the garrison will not be able to be spawned. It will be blocked, and it will appear red on the map, which means no one can spawn there. That's the blue zone area. Moving on to the red zone garrisons, 100 meters is the name of the game here. So if you have a red zone garrison and there's no enemy within 100 meters of that garrison, people can spawn on it, and they can use it as long as there's no one within 100 meters of it. And it goes vice versa. If there's an enemy within 100 meters of that garrison, no one can use it until either that person is killed or there's no one in that whole 100-meter circle around the garrison. So that's how you disable them. Now, how does that look on the map, and how does that work to your advantage and how you should build your garrisons? So here's another picture I was able to find regarding all the different combinations you can have when garrisons are on the map. So we're going to start at the top and work our way down with this, with all the possible garrison scenarios here. So on the top right, we have a garrison in the red zone. It's green. There's no red dot in the circle or the 100-meter circle around the garrison, which means it can be used. Moving on to the center circle here in the red zone, we have a garrison that's locked out because there is a red dot or an enemy soldier in the 100-meter radius around the garrison, regardless if you have several blueberries or blue indicators there, players that are in the area. There's one guy in that 100-meter radius that's an enemy, so the garrison cannot be used. Now, these next two are why you should pay attention to the borderlines between the blue zone and the red zone. So if we look on the one on the left, it's green, even though there is a soldier in the 100-meter circle. But because the garrison is built in the blue zone or friendly territory, the 15-meter rule applies, where the enemy has to be within 15 meters to disable the garrison, prevent people from spawning. Compared to the one on the far right, where, since it's built in the red zone or enemy territory, once the enemy is within 100 meters of that garrison, it can no longer be used, even if it's at the 99 or 100-meter point. Moving now down to the 3 garrisons in the blue zone. On the one on the left side here, where we got the red circle, but green overall circle here, we have enemies within 50 meters of that garrison, which means that enemies are near, but the garrison can still be spawned on to be defended and still be used as a whole. Doing a quick turn to the right here, where there's a friendly cap circle, there's a garrison, there's no one in it at all, there's no indicator, there's no one within a 50-meter point in the blue zone, so that garrison is completely free of enemies, and there's no one within 50 meters of it. And the one at the far right, down in the bottom right corner, there's enemies within 15 meters of that garrison, so it cannot be used, and is most likely being taken out at that point. Last thing I'll touch on about garrisons is just what they look like. On the left, you have what the U.S. garrison looks like. In the middle, you have the German. And on the right, you have the Soviet. I just went online and found a picture of this. It's just a very simple way to put it, but this is what they look like. Now that we've talked enough about garrisons, we can finally move on and talk about airhead spawns. So airheads are a deployable that the commander can use and drop in a spawn point from the air. Now, the commander is the only person in the game who can do this, and it requires that they have 400 manpower to do so. And it's off cooldown, which, say if you've used it, needs to be 10 minutes go by for it to be used again. But the airheads, as you see on screen now, they're dropped from the sky, just like a supply drop or an ammo drop. So overall, the airhead is somewhat obvious, not only because of the fact that it's in the air, but there's an outline exactly where it's going to land. As you see on screen now, it hasn't touched the ground yet. It's still in the air. I'm about to ping the outline just to show you exactly what it is if you couldn't tell. But there's the airhead. It lands perfectly in that outline. So the other main thing to know about airheads, so their spawn timer is every 30 seconds. However, unlike basically all the other spawns, they're on a timer. That timer is for 3 minutes. So if you do some basic math here, if you can spawn every 30 seconds on airhead and the overall timer for an airhead is 3 minutes before it is completely gone, that means you have a total of 6 spawns that you can do while the airhead is active, provided it doesn't get destroyed. To destroy the airhead, it acts the same way as a garrison, but with outpost-like characteristics. To block it from people spawning on it, you have to be within 10 meters of it. And to destroy it, you can use an explosive, tank round, go up to it manually and destroy it. All this works. Last thing to mention with the airheads is that unlike a garrison, half-track, or outpost, they do not make any radio noise, and they are exactly the same for all 3 countries. The fourth and final deployable spawn point is the Halftrack. So a Halftrack is basically a lightly armed and armored vehicle that can transport people into battle. And in Hell Let Loose, these can be used as mobile spawn points. So how they work is the commander has to deploy them using fuel, 300 to be exact, and they have to deploy them at one of the headquarters and drive them up. Now, anyone can drive them, but they have to drive them up to the front, and then they have to shut off the engine to actually let the spawn point activate. Once you've driven a half-track to the position you wish and shut off the engine, it'll be allowed to act as a spawn point. It'll have the same radio chatter as a outpost or garrison, but the spawn timer is unfortunately the longest of any of the spawn points, 60 seconds. Now, even with the long spawn timer, this vehicle does have some pros and cons. First off, it's mobile. It can be moved from place to place, whether in a defensive position or an offensive position. Secondly, it is armored enough to be impervious to small arms fire, which means that machine gunners who can take out trucks cannot take out this vehicle, and even though there are little vision slits, you can't shoot through them. So you can still see, the enemy can try shooting at them, but you will be completely safe. The only way an infantryman can truly kill you without using explosives is to be shooting down at you, which means they have to be in a high position, which can be very hard to do, especially when the vehicle's moving. However, this vehicle is not completely impervious to explosives such as tank rounds, bazooka rounds, and so on. So it's important to keep these safe, and it doesn't take much to destroy these vehicles. One rocket shot will usually do the trick. Now, say you're a rifleman, you don't have any AT ability. What can you do to prevent people from spawning on it? Well, you need to be within 10 meters of the half-track. By doing so, you'll hear radio squelching noise or radio jamming noises like the Garrison I showed earlier. That means that no one can spawn on it until you are either gone or past the 10-meter point. Now, if the engine is running, there's no need to sit there. No one can spawn on the enemy half-track anyway. So just keep all that in mind. When it comes to driving the half-tracks, though, anyone can drive them, but your overall speed is going to be about 30 to 35 knots for all three countries. So, and it's an automatic gearbox, so you don't have to worry about shifting gears all the time like you're in a regular tank. Overall, you do have 3 modules, the hull, the engine, and the tracks, but chances are you're not going to get hit enough with anything of note to actually damage those, because if you take a rocket hit in one of these, you're not going to live long enough to tell a tale, let alone expect damage in these other 2 areas, such as the engine or the track. So that's half-tracks in a nutshell. Now, for the different countries, for the Germans, you have the SDKFZ-251 or Soderkraftversorgung 251 half-track, and for the Americans and Soviets, you have the M3 half-track. The last one I want to touch on is the headquarters spawn or the HQ spawns. Now, these overall are pretty simple in what they are. They're a spawn at the very back of the lines, and you have 3 of them. You've got one in the north, center, and south. This is where basically you have your staging areas, you have your resupplies or vehicles, repair stations. This is where your vehicles spawn, where you can spawn 2 every 10 seconds. Now, there's only one exception to why an HQ wouldn't be spawning you in every 10 seconds. That would be if you're playing offensive on Omaha or Utah Beach as the Americans. If you're on the American side of an offensive game mode on these beaches, the spawn timer will be 30 seconds as you'll be landing on landing craft. Overall, you should have access to all 3 headquarters except for 2 instances. One being if you are on the attacking team on offensive game mode. So you have to take the first objective if you're on the attacking team on offensive to gain access to the other 2 HQ spawns. The other way you can lose access to a HQ or not have access to an HQ spawn is by taking the last objective, or the enemy is taking your last objective. So in this example here, if the enemy started taking St. Mary Approach, we would lose access to the southern spawn and would have only the center and northern HQs to spawn on, which that's the only way you can lock out a headquarters spawn. You can't place a garrison in them to block them. You have to be taking that objective in that area. In this case, it's St. Mary Approach. We would lose access to that southern HQ spawn. Now, to get that spawn back, you have to drive the enemy out of that area. So there has to be 0 capture progress on that last objective for the HQ spawn to be reopened. A game like Hell Let Loose, knowing how outposts work, garrisons, half-tracks, airheads, headquarters spawns, all this is just one step of knowing how to play the game properly and how to help potentially lead your team to victory. I hope you took away something from this video. I appreciate your time in watching, and I'll see you on the next video.